Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to Women Who Rock Investigate, an affiliate of Women Who Rock with Success. We report case studies in the areas of policy and government, medical malpractices, health pandemics, biotech and fracking, global climate change, prison, and police reform, and more. Our topics are covered around the latest breaking news reports in the U.S. and around the globe. We can be heard on Spotify, Google Play, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, iTunes, Podbean, Airtime Pro, and SAM Broadcasting radio stations, and more. Our hand-picked experts on the show provide credible information from their fields of experience. Join us on Thursdays at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time as we discover the latest in news reports. Now join us live in the studio with our show host, Mrs. Diane Winbush.
And good morning and welcome to Women Who Rock Investigates, and thank you so much for tuning in with us. And we have been out for a few weeks, and we're going to jump back into the show, and we want to start off this month in regards to forensics. This is something that individuals still try to test. Some individuals, when they go to court, they feel that the testing is inaccurate, and sometimes individuals do not get the full scope and concept of what the purpose of forensics, how forensics work, and how forensics can also be able to detect many aspects of evidence for court, for parental testing, for biological trace evidence, all of the above. And so today we have in the studio the founder of AZ Forensics, and she is none other than Miss Anita Zannin. Did I get that right?
Sure did.
So good. Okay, so good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about you before you got started with forensic science. Tell the audience, let us learn a little bit about you. Okay,
my path to this career is a little bit different than most people. My primary area of specialties are bloodstain pattern analysis and crime scene investigation. And many people that do this as independent consultants have kind of grown up in law enforcement and then gone on to do consulting. I have a very lengthy medical background. I worked in an emergency room for a number of years, and then on the donor side of organ and tissue transplant. And then I went back to school for forensic chemistry. And that was where I started in bloodstain pattern analysis. And I got a second bachelor's in criminal justice and a master's in forensic science.
Okay, great. So what kind of compelled you to be able to pursue that? Was it the medical field, or was it you was a crime scene guru? You know, a lot of individuals, they take criminal justice because they watch a lot of CSI. You know, sometimes individuals may be compelled to learn more about it. I know a lot of individuals, colleagues, they're going to school to be paralegals because they want to learn a little bit more about the justice system. So what compelled you to be able to do a deeper research in this?
That's a good question. You know, when I went back to school, I originally wanted to go back for behavioral profiling. You know, it's the folks that kind of read a crime scene and tell you you're looking for a 20-year-old white male, unemployed, lives in his mother's basement kind of guy. But there really weren't the programs for that when I went back to school. And so the only program forensically that was around where I had to be geographically at that time was a forensic chemistry program. And it required an internship, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I did not want to be in a lab all day. So I kind of fell into it because the father of the discipline in this part of the world lived just a couple of hours away, and I did my internship in bloodstain pattern analysis, and here I am 17 years later still doing it.
Okay, great. So first part of the segment, we're going to talk about DNA. We're going to talk about certain types of forensics. And then on the second portion of the show, we'll get into actually a little bit deeper into AZ forensics. And so explain to the audience a little bit about the defining of forensics.
Well, very basically, forensic science is matters of science as applied to law. So essentially, if there's any kind of real-world discipline like biology or chemistry or even something like metrology, which is the science of measurement, and even meteorology, there can be a forensic counterpart because there may be some legal application. So it's matters of science as applied to law.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And so share with us also different types. Okay, so when I was taking, I think I was taking communications, and so when I was working on that degree with journalism, with the concentration in journalism, I took criminal law, I took juvenile justice, and what have you. I took a lot of criminal courses with the degree because I feel that any time that an individual is a journalist or a reporter, and my field is basically getting into investigative reporting, I felt that those types of courses and classes were beneficial for that type of study. So when we talk about biological and trace evidence, because I love forensic files, cold case files, that's all I watch. I was watching it last night, The New Detectives, that's just where I'm at. And so when we talk about biological evidence, share a little bit. We're going to break that down. Trace, we're going to break down biological evidence, and we're going to break down the DNA evidence to the audience that way. Because a lot of times individuals, they will recreate the wheel, and then also we do a little prison reform as well. This helps also our prison reform audience to be able to understand a little bit more, because individuals say, oh, well, the coroner, he got it wrong, or the forensics analysis, they got it wrong as well, and what have you. But science is not wrong. And so you try to help individuals to be able to understand all of the components that are consistent with forensics. So share a little bit, if you would, about the biological side of it and the trace side of it. Okay, so you said science is not wrong, and I would say that's kind of qualified correct. You know, as long as there are humans involved in the system, you know, there's the potential for error and for improper results to be reported or incorrectly interpreted. So, you know, DNA in and of itself, you know, is not wrong, but the person who interprets it might be. So biological and trace evidence can actually be one and the same. When we're talking about biological evidence, you're talking about things like body fluids, body tissue, things like that are typically present in trace amounts. So trace evidence is it can be hairs, fibers, body fluids, anything that is present in very small amounts. Okay. So in regards to a rape kit, so here in our local jurisdiction, in the area of Memphis, Tennessee, there were a lot of issues that went on in regards to the women, because it took so much financial funding to be able to test all of the kits. I think that there are still some lawsuits that are going on now simply because of the rape kits being on the back burner, or perhaps maybe the city did not have all of the funds to be able to test at that time. So when an individual is looking for results in regards to rape kit testing, what is it that the first thing that they should be able to understand about the forensics part of that?
Well, I think that probably so the results of the kit, along with the results of the exam, kind of go hand in hand. And it's not uncommon that there is evidence of sexual activity, but that doesn't necessarily mean rape. And just because there are injuries, that also doesn't necessarily mean rape. You know, some people are into rough sex that can cause vaginal tearing or anal tearing or things like that would show up on an exam that we might think is an indication of rape. And it may be, but it also may not be. You know, there can be very many compounding factors. So say somebody engaged in rough sex with their partner and then was subsequently raped. You can see how that might confound the problem in figuring out who did what when. The rape kit collects things like fingernail scraping, head hair, pubic hair, vaginal swabs, anal swabs, oral swabs, all looking for that trace biological evidence. So if you had consensual sex and then were subsequently raped, you may have DNA from two people in there that has to be sorted out. So it's not always as straightforward as it might seem.
Absolutely, because a lot of individuals, I do agree with you. Sometimes it may, the testing may result from the force of the forcedness of the activity that went on, and a lot of times individuals, I don't know, they have this thing now, and they have this thing now where people can be married and they still can be able to say rape. They still can be able to cry rape, even if they are married, they live in the same household and what have you. And I'm pretty sure that may be a little challenge to be able to prove that, as well. Not for sure. That's not my field of study, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up. So in regards to, so for a case that I think I had saw on the news, how do forensics test something from a case that perhaps may be very, very cold, like 3 or 4 decades before?
Well, it depends on the case, excuse me, and what you're looking for. How evidence is stored is hugely important as to the significance of, the relevance of the subsequent forensic testing. So, DNA does degrade over time and in certain conditions. So it really would depend on the specific case and what you're looking to test.
Okay. Wow, that's straight and cut. Okay. So, because sometimes it kind of appears to be a little questionable sometimes, and you think back and you'll say, oh well, how was that able to, preserve that long and what have you for 30 or 40 years, and I mean, and I guess the individual agrees to it. I'm not for sure about all of that, what have you. I'm not in law enforcement at this time, but just something that I wanted to be able to share and be able to convey over with the audience. So the next question would be,
it's really important how the evidence is stored. In my area, bloodstained pattern analysis, we've got chemicals that have been able to detect bloodstains from as far back as like the Civil War. So it really depends on how things are stored and how they were collected and packaged and things like that at the time.
Absolutely, because that's something that I had learned also with taking one of the courses, and it was the temperature, how you package it up, whether it's in plastic, and some of the evidence, once the everyone arrives, the team arrives on the scene, and it's kind of unique as to when a crime happens, how the certain teams are dispatched at a specific time. It kind of flows like into a sequence, and so I enjoyed taking several of those courses to be able to learn about that as to who's the first one that's on the scene, and the importance of how, you have to be able to block off the public so they will not contaminate the crime scene and what have you. And so I think that is that's kind of unique, and I kind of enjoyed seeing that, and that's order, structure, when it comes to individuals determining, accuracy with the forensics and the results.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, and so we want to talk about some other types of forensics as to determining with carpet fibers. And so with a case, and I don't want to call the individual's name out, and I think his case, I think he just lost an appeal not too long ago, but he was convicted some years ago, back in the 70s or back in the early 80s, and it was based off of carpet fibers. And so tell us a little bit about that as to how forensics would be able to detail that, as to connect that with the victim and their private household or apartment or whatever they may live in.
Okay, well, I should preface it by saying, I'm not a trace evidence examiner, but typically the sort of thing that would be done is if there was fibers on a victim, they would compare them with samples from the suspect's home or car or wherever was relevant to the case. They would do a visual examination, and then as things have progressed over time, you can do a chemical analysis and things like that, dye lots and that sort of thing, to be able to try and narrow down the type of carpet, manufacturer, things like that. And so that's how they would try and make that connection. But the strength of the connection, of course, would depend on the number of unique characteristics of that particular carpet.
Okay, great. So we're going to move into the next segment, and this is going to be talking about what your business has, and that's AZ Forensics Associates, LLC. So tell us a little bit about that. Help us to learn a little bit more about what you do and what you do for the law enforcement side, and as well as for clients that you serve.
Sure. So I'm an independent consultant that I get retained at various points in the criminal justice process, whether it's a new case or a cold case or post-conviction, even civil cases, wrongful death, product liability, things like that. And I work for both the prosecution and the defense. To me, it doesn't matter who retains me. I should be saying the same thing regardless of who puts me on the stand. The evidence just is the evidence. So, typically the way that goes is that I get a phone call or an email about a case. We discuss it and what they are, what kind of questions they're hoping the evidence might be able to answer. And then if I can fit it into my schedule and there's no conflicts, then we move ahead and I review the case materials and come up with an opinion. And then they'll either have me write a report and or testify, or if my findings are not consistent with their theory of the case, then we just part ways. And that happens, fairly often, where I'll tell them that, the bloodstain evidence is either, equivocal or just not useful in this case, or what I found directly contradicts their theory of the case. So then I don't end up writing a report.
Okay. And so how important how important does the court rely on your testimony when you come to the courtroom?
Well, it depends on the case and what the significant factors are. All of the forensic sciences are really just a tool in the toolbox. And, you hear on TV all the time that, it's a circumstantial case. Forensic evidence is circumstantial evidence. Things like DNA and latent prints, you can't put a timestamp on those as to when they were left at the scene. So, were they left there during the incident or were they at some point prior? Nobody can tell you that. And so direct evidence is things like eyewitness testimony. So just because something is circumstantial doesn't make it bad. And the same thing with all of the forensic sciences. There's an element of subjectivity in pretty much every discipline where interpretations have to be made and you come to an opinion. That doesn't necessarily make it bad or unreliable, but it certainly should be reviewed and tested.
Okay. That's fair enough, because a lot of times, forensic specialists, sometimes they'll, their testimonies will get, I don't know what the appropriate word is, but sometimes they'll try to, especially with the coroners and what have you and stuff. Sometimes reports, when it comes to forensic, some people try to get their own, then the defense will have their testimony, and then the prosecution will have theirs. So you offer services for both defendant and for the plaintiff.
Right, for defendant, plaintiff, or prosecution. And that does happen. And it's confusing for jurors because, they're not educated in forensic science. And so I've heard oftentimes that, where there were diametrically opposed experts, they didn't know who to believe, so they just didn't consider that part of the evidence. And that's unfortunate. So I'm not one of those experts that pushes to testify in every case, especially if there is an opposing expert. Because for that reason, because if the opposing expert is somebody that has a reputation of being ethical and honest, and I think they can get the answers they need out of that person, then I will push them more to do a good cross-examination and to bring out the information that they need from the opposing expert, rather than have me go up there kind of as an opposing expert to that one and potentially confuse things. Now, sometimes it's simply unavoidable that you have to have experts from other sides, and just as there are unethical people in every field, there are in forensic science as well. And so sometimes, or they're simply mistaken, or not educated enough, or, there's a variety of reasons that, the evidence may need to be challenged or more fully fleshed out and explained.
Okay, great. That's fair enough. So what is the next chapter that you would like to see for AZ Forensic Associates? What's the next chapter? A lot of people, they have peaks. They continue to grow. They continue to come up with new initiatives for their organization and what have you. So what is the next step that you would like to see as maybe like a long-term goal for AZ Forensics?
Yeah, I think, I've been doing this a long time now, so we may be winding down. Okay. But in the meantime, I think getting back into teaching a little more frequently, and, I've had to make some moves geographically, and so I definitely enjoy teaching and kind of helping the next generation of analysts learn the ropes.
Okay, great. That's awesome. So with the last question, of course, we want you to be able to share any links or any upcoming debuts that you may be having in the public, such as any master classes that you are offering in a training, because we would love to have you to be able to come back on the show as a Q&A. That way, we'll see if we could be able to round up some students that can be able to benefit from some of the resources that you have. And so we would love to invite you back to the show, Anita, to be able to be a panelist, and so we can be able to learn more. I love, like I mentioned before, American Justice, Cold Case Files, Forensic, the New Detectives, FBI Files. That just has always been me. I first started out like with a marketing type of certificate, and then when I started college, and then something just kept coming up about Dateline, and I just got right into that reporting for journalism, so I could be able to learn a little bit more about investigative reports. So that was just my theory on that. Yeah, and so one thing just led to another. Yeah, so we would love for you to be able to come back on the show whenever you're available. I know you have a lot of itineraries that you have to be able to do, court and what have you. So with that being said, you can be able to share how the listeners can be able to reach you, connect with you, follow you on any social media platforms, your website, as well as any books that you have written. You can be able to gear them towards any links at this time.
Sounds good. My website is www.az-forensics.com, and we also have a Facebook page. And as far as books, I've written a couple of textbooks chapters, one in a veterinary forensics book and one in an international forensic book. Yeah, that's something a lot of people don't know a lot about, is the veterinary forensics, and that's the forensic kind of animal CSI applied to things like dog biting and animal abuse cases and things like that. So, it's definitely different. You know, it's the same discipline but applied differently, and so I often have to work in conjunction with that so that I can understand the physiology of the particular animal and things like that. So that'd be a whole other show.
That is amazing! Wow, I could be able to take that once I get it and find it, to be able to share that with pet lovers. People are very kind of promiscuous about animals and how things work with them, and so I think that would be great. Okay, so thank you so much for being our guest on today, and again, I'm going to shoot a couple of emails out to you probably about the next 30 days and see what your schedule permits, and we're going to see if we can be able to get you back on the show with an audience, and we can learn a little bit more about forensics, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks again for having me.
Okay, great. So listeners, you know where to go, to our website at womenwhorockWithSuccess.com for all resources, and then you can be able to find out a little bit more about us as always, and then you can connect with us on our Facebook page, Women Who Rock with Success, and then also Women Who Rock Investigate. So until next time, you take care. Thank you so much, Anita.
You're most welcome. Have a good day.
You too.